Imagine waking up tomorrow with no house, no supermarket, no electricity, and no medicine. Outside your shelter, the temperature is dropping. Somewhere in the darkness, predators are moving. You need food, you need water, and if you make one serious mistake, there may be no second chance. For most of human history, this wasn't an extreme survival challenge. It was normal life. So how did ancient humans survive? The surprising answer is that they didn't survive because they were stronger than everything around them. They survived because they became incredibly good at solving problems. And some of those solutions were surprisingly clever. The first problem was obvious: cold. Your body can only tolerate so much exposure to freezing temperatures before the environment becomes dangerous. Ancient humans couldn't turn on a heater, so they changed the environment instead. They built shelters. Some were made from wood, branches, stone, animal hides, and whatever materials were available nearby. And in extremely cold environments, a shelter needed to do more than keep rain away. It had to block wind, trap heat, and create a small space that could actually be warmed. Then came one of humanity's greatest survival technologies: fire. Fire gave humans warmth. It gave them light. It helped keep some predators away. And, perhaps most importantly, it allowed them to cook food. But fire came with a problem. You couldn't simply make it once and forget about it. Someone had to keep it alive. Someone had to find fuel. Someone had to protect it from wind and rain. And eventually, humans learned something even more useful: how to make fire when they needed it. At that point, fire was no longer something you simply found. It became something you could create because you knew how. And that changed everything. But staying warm wasn't enough. You also had to protect your body. And this is where clothing gets surprisingly complicated. We often imagine ancient humans simply wrapping animal skins around themselves. But useful clothing required real work. Hides had to be scraped, cleaned, cut, and prepared. Then they had to be shaped into something that could actually protect the body. And in colder environments, poorly made clothing could be the difference between staying alive and losing heat rapidly. So surviving extreme cold wasn't simply about having animal skins. It was about knowing how to turn those materials into effective clothing. But then came an even bigger problem: food. A supermarket gives you thousands of choices. Ancient humans had whatever the landscape gave them, and sometimes the landscape gave them almost nothing. So humans became experts at finding opportunities. They hunted, they gathered, they followed animal movements. They learned where plants grew, they learned which foods were safe, and they learned how to use almost every useful part of an animal. Meat could provide food, fat could provide concentrated energy, hides could become clothing or shelter, bones could become tools, and a single successful hunt could provide enough resources to keep a group going for a long time. But hunting something huge created another problem. You had to survive the hunt. Ancient humans didn't have guns. They didn't have engines. They didn't have modern safety equipment. They had cooperation. A large animal wasn't simply something you fought. It was a problem you solved together. People could track it, predict its movement, coordinate with each other, and use weapons designed to keep them at a safer distance. One human was vulnerable. A group of humans was something completely different. And that may have been one of the most important survival technologies humans ever developed: cooperation. Because there were problems no individual could solve alone. Shelters could be built together. Food could be processed together. Children could be protected together. Fire could be maintained together. And knowledge could be shared. But food created another problem. What happens when you find a huge amount today and almost nothing tomorrow? You can't put it in a refrigerator. So humans had to find ways to preserve what they had. Meat could be dried. It could be smoked. In cold environments, it could sometimes be naturally frozen. Food could also be stored in protected places and saved for later. And now something important changes. You're no longer just surviving today. You're preparing for tomorrow. That means you're watching the seasons. You're watching the weather. You're watching the animals. You're learning the landscape. And you're making decisions before the crisis happens. That is what made ancient humans so powerful. Not their claws. They didn't have claws. Not their speed. They weren't the fastest animals. Their advantage was something much harder to see. They could prepare. They could cooperate. And they could remember what worked. A useful shelter could be improved. A successful hunting strategy could be taught. A good tool could be copied. A dangerous plant could be remembered. A reliable food source could become part of the group's knowledge. Every generation inherited more than genes. They inherited information. And that may have been the craziest survival method of all. Knowledge itself became a survival tool. Imagine two groups facing the same freezing night. One group knows how to make fire. The other doesn't. The difference isn't physical strength. It's knowledge. One group knows which materials burn well, which materials keep heat inside a shelter, which plants are safe, where animals travel, how to make useful clothing, how to preserve food, how to build protection from the environment. Suddenly, the environment isn't quite as unbeatable. The cold is still cold. The predators are still dangerous. The hunger is still real. But humans have changed the equation. They didn't become the strongest animal on Earth. They became the animal that could change its strategy. And that's why some of the greatest survival tools humans ever developed weren't weapons. They were fire, clothing, shelter, food storage, cooperation, and knowledge. Every generation added another solution. And eventually, those solutions became so normal that we forgot how incredible they actually were. Because today, when you're cold, you turn up the heat. When you're hungry, you open the refrigerator. When you're injured, you call a doctor. When a storm is coming, your phone tells you. Ancient humans had none of that. They had the environment, their tools, each other, and the knowledge they managed to pass forward. And somehow, that was enough to survive a world that was trying very hard to kill them.